Marcus Vale had always preferred plants to people, which made his current predicament particularly ironic. Crouched behind a cluster of luminescent ferns on the planet Zirion 7, he carefully extracted soil samples while trying to ignore the thunderous sounds of what appeared to be some sort of celebration in the distance. The rhythmic drumming and harmonic chanting had been going on for hours, but Marcus had work to do. As the Galactic Botanical Survey's most juniors and a botanist, he'd been thrilled to be assigned to this mission, even if it meant working alone on a planet that had only recently made contact with the Galactic Alliance. The flora here was unlike anything in the databases, with plants that seemed to respond to emotional states and atmospheric pressure in ways that defied conventional understanding. Just a few more samples, he muttered to himself, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he labeled another specimen container. His brown hair fell into his eyes as he worked, and he absently pushed it back with a dirt-stained hand. The locals had been friendly enough when he'd arrived, though communication had been limited to gestures and the few phrases his translation device could manage. The drumming suddenly stopped, and the silence felt ominous. Marcus looked up from his work, realizing for the first time that the sky had darkened considerably. The twin suns of Zirion 7 were setting, painting the crystalline formations that dotted the landscape in brilliant shades of purple and gold away. Rustling in the nearby bushes made him freeze. 3 tall, elegant beings emerged from the foliage, their skin shimmering with an opalescent quality that reminded Marcus of mother of pearl. They wore flowing robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself, and their large, luminous eyes regarded him with what he hoped was curiosity rather than hostility. "Greetings," said the center figure, a female whose voice carried a musical quality that made Marcus's chest resonate sympathetically. "We have been searching for you, honored visitor." Marcus's translation device kicked in with a soft chime, though he noticed it seemed to struggle with certain concepts. "Oh, hello," he stammered, scrambling to his feet and nearly dropping his sample case. "I'm sorry if I'm trespassing. I was just collecting botanical specimens for research purposes." The 3 beings exchanged glances that seemed loaded with meaning. "You have come bearing gifts for the joining ceremony," the spokeswoman continued, gesturing toward his case of plant samples, "the sacred flowers of understanding, the roots of deep connection, the seeds of future growth. We are honored by your offering." "I'm sorry, there seems to be some misunderstanding," Marcus began, but the beings were already moving, surrounding him with gentle but insistent pressure. "These are just research samples. I'm not here for any ceremony. Modesty becomes you, chosen one," said one of the male figures, his voice deep and resonant. "But the time has come. The drums have called, the moons align, and Princess Zara awaits your answer." Before Marcus could protest further, he was being guided through the crystal formations toward had appeared to be a vast amphitheater carved into the living rock. Thousands of the opalescent beings filled the terraced seating, their collective humming creating an otherworldly harmony that seemed to vibrate in his bones. At the center of the amphitheater stood a figure that made Marcus forget how to breathe. She was tall and graceful, with the same shimmering skin as the others, but her presence commanded the space around her like gravity commands planets. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, adorned with tiny lights that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. When her eyes met his across the distance, Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. "Behold," announced his escort in a voice that carried across the entire gathering, "the Earthling comes with the sacred offerings to answer Princess Zara's call for union." The crowd erupted in harmonious song, a sound so beautiful it brought tears to Marcus's eyes. But through his wonder, panic was beginning to set in. Sacred offerings? Union? This was definitely not botanical research. "Wait," he called out, but his voice was lost in the celebration. The crowd was standing now, thousands of beings raising their arms toward the star-filled sky. As the twin moons crested the horizon, Princess Zara began walking toward him, and Marcus noticed that her feet didn't quite seem to touch the ground as she approached. Marcus could see that her eyes held depths like still pools, reflecting starlight in ways that seemed impossible. She stopped just out of arm's reach, and when she spoke, her voice was like music made tangible. Marcus of Earth, she said, and he wondered distantly how she knew his name. You have traveled across the void between worlds to bring these tokens of your intent. The flowers of understanding speak of your desire to know my heart. The roots of deep connection show your wish to intertwine our destinies, the seeds of future growth. Her voice caught slightly, promised children of two worlds, bridges between the stars. Marcus looked down at his sample case with growing horror. Through some cosmic misunderstanding, his botanical specimens had been interpreted as a marriage proposal to an alien princess. The crowd was watching expectantly. The princess was gazing at him with hope and vulnerability in her otherworldly eyes, and Marcus realized that his next words might determine the fate of human-Zerian relations. Princess Zera, he began, carefully, his scientist's mind racing through possible solutions while his heart hammered against his ribs. I think we need to talk. Princess Zera Nethys had dreamed of this moment since childhood, though her dreams had never included quite so much confusion on her intended's face. Standing in the sacred amphitheater before thousands of her people, she studied the curious earthling who had somehow managed to fulfill the ancient prophecies, while looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. Talk, she repeated, her melodious voice carrying a note of uncertainty in all the romantic tales passed down through generations of her people. The chosen one had never requested conversation during the ceremony of eternal binding. But Marcus of Earth, the moons are aligned, the sacred offerings have been presented, and the stars themselves sing of our destined union. Marcus's face had gone pale beneath his tan, and he clutched his sample case like a lifeline. Your Highness, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. These aren't offerings. They're scientific specimens. I'm just a botanist. Zera's heart fluttered with something between disappointment and intrigue. A botanist, she repeated, testing the unfamiliar word on her tongue. Her people had no equivalent concept, as their relationship with plant life was spiritual rather than scientific. You speak to the green ones directly, commune with their essence. Well, not exactly. Marcus began, then stopped as he noticed the hopeful expression on her face. I study them, their genetics, their cellular structures, their environmental adaptations. To Zera's ears, filtered through the mystical understanding of her people, this sounded even more romantic than the traditional courtship rituals. You seek to understand their very souls, she breathed, stepping closer. You wish to know their deepest secrets, their most intimate truths. Oh, Marcus of Earth, you are indeed the chosen one. The crowd's harmonious humming grew louder, and Zera could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down like a physical force. According to the prophecy of the Starbridge, a being from another world would come bearing the sacred offerings. When the twin moons aligned in the constellation of eternal love, he would be awkward in their ways but pure of heart, and their union would bring prosperity to both worlds for 1,000 generations. Marcus certainly seemed awkward enough, she thought with a mixture of affection and amusement. He was nothing like the warriors and nobles who had sought her hand in the past, where they had been bold and confident. He was hesitant and thoughtful. Where they had spoken of conquest and glory, he spoke of understanding and discovery. His brown eyes held a gentleness that made her chest tighten with unfamiliar emotion. Princess, Marcus said urgently, I need you to understand where I come from. Marriage is a choice between two people who love each other. I don't even know you, and you don't know me. We can't just love, Zera interrupted, the word resonating through her being like a struck bell. You speak of the deep bonding, the soul song that unites two hearts across the void. She had studied the concept in the ancient texts, though she had never experienced it herself. But how can we know if the deep bonding exists between us if we do not try? Before Marcus could respond, Zera's grandmother, Naya Starweaver, glided forward from the crowd. At 300 years old, she was the eldest of the Crystalline Dominion's royal family, and her wisdom was legendary. Her opalescent skin had taken on a more pronounced luminescence with age, and tiny crystals grew from her temples like a crown of living jewels. Grandmother, Zera said with relief, please explain to Marcus of Earth that the prophecy is clear. The signs have been fulfilled. Naya's ancient eyes twinkled with what might have been mischief as she regarded the nervous human. The young one speaks truth, she said. her voice carrying the authority of centuries. But perhaps the chosen one requires proof of our ways before he can embrace his destiny. Marcus looked between the two women with growing desperation. I appreciate your traditions. Truly I do, but I can't marry someone I've just met. It's not how my people do things. Then perhaps, Naya suggested with a smile that reminded Zara strongly of her grandmother's legendary matchmaking schemes, you would consent to the ritual of understanding, a temporary bonding that would allow you to know each other's hearts. Before the final ceremony, Zara's breath caught. The ritual of understanding was an ancient practice, rarely performed in modern times. It would create a psychic link between them, allowing them to share thoughts and emotions for a limited time. It was incredibly intimate, reserved for only the most serious courtships. What exactly would this ritual involve? Marcus asked warily. You would share the sacred pool, Naya explained, gesturing toward a crystalline formation that began to glow at her words. The waters would open your minds to each other, allowing you to see truth without deception. If, after one full cycle of the moons, you still believe you are not meant to be joined, you would be free to leave. Marcus glanced at Zara, then at the expectant crowd, then back at the glowing pool. And if I refuse, then you would be free to leave now, Naya said simply. Though I fear the prophecy would remain unfulfilled and both our peoples would lose the chance for the great alliance foretold in the stars. Zara felt her heart sink. She had been so certain when she first saw him. This gentle stranger with his careful hands and thoughtful eyes. The way he had spoken of understanding the deepest secrets of growing things, of seeking truth through patient study rather than force. It had resonated with something deep in her soul. I would not force you, she said quietly, meeting his gaze. But I confess, Marcus of Earth, that I am curious about your heart. The prophecy speaks of a union that would bring wisdom to both our worlds. And I sense that you carry knowledge that could help my people grow. Just as, she added with a small smile, I believe my people might have things to teach you about the songs that plants sing. When no one is listening, Marcus's expression shifted, and Zara saw something spark in his eyes, the same curiosity she had seen when he spoke of his botanical studies. Plants sing. Oh yes, Zara said, warming to the subject. The whispering vines share gossip about the weather. The harmony flowers create symphonies that can heal wounded spirits. And the dreaming trees, they remember everything that has ever happened beneath their branches and sing the stories too. Those who know how to listen. For the first time since he had arrived, Marcus looked genuinely intrigued rather than terrified. That's impossible. Plants don't have vocal cords or, perhaps, Zara interrupted gently. They simply sing in ways your instruments cannot measure. Marcus stood silent for a long moment, and Zara could almost see his scientific mind wrestling with the implications. Finally, he looked up at her with an expression that was part resignation, part excitement. The ritual of understanding, he said slowly, it would only last one moon cycle. One cycle. Naya confirmed, and you would be free to leave if you choose. Marcus took a deep breath, and Zara felt her heart begin to race. I suppose, he said, I've never been one to turn down a research opportunity. Finn O'Malley had always prided himself on being the Galactic Alliance's most enthusiastic cultural attaché, though his colleagues might have used words like overzealous or catastrophically well-meaning instead. When the emergency communique came through about a botanical survey team member who had somehow become involved in high-level diplomatic negotiations on Zirian 7, Finn knew this was his moment to shine. Don't worry, Marcus, he announced cheerfully as he bustled into the crystalline chamber where his fellow human was, apparently preparing for some sort of alien ritual. Finn O'Malley, Cultural Attaché 3rd Class, at your service. I've read every file we have on Zirian customs, and I'm here to make sure this whole situation gets sorted out properly. Marcus looked up from where he was seated beside the glowing pool, his expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. Finn, thank God you're here. I think I may have accidentally agreed to marry an alien princess. Ah yes, the classic xenocultural misunderstanding, Finn said, pulling out his data pad and consulting his hastily downloaded files. Happens more often than you'd think. Now, according to my research, The Zirionians have a very complex courtship structure based on, let me see here, ritualistic exchange of crystalline formations and ceremonial combat. Princess Zara, who had been gracefully arranging luminescent flowers around the sacred pool, paused in her work. I believe there may be some confusion in your sources, she said diplomatically. We are the Netherians of the crystalline dominion, and we do not practice ceremonial combat. Ah, Finn said, tapping his data pad frantically. Right, different species entirely, easy mistake. The Netherians are the ones with the seasonal molting rituals and the hierarchical mating displays involving geometric patterns. Zara's opalescent skin flickered with what Marcus was beginning to recognize as suppressed amusement. No, that would be the geometry from the Andromeda sector. We are empathic plant singers who form emotional bonds through shared consciousness. Of course, Finn beamed, completely missing the subtle correction. Plant singers. That explains the botanical samples, clearly. Marcus here was attempting the traditional Zirian Netherian courtship ritual by bringing specimens of Earth flora as a demonstration of his planet's biological diversity and his own expertise in. He trailed off as both Marcus and Zara stared at him. Finn, Marcus said carefully, I think you might be overcomplicating this. Nonsense. Finn waved dismissively. Cultural exchange is all about understanding the subtle nuances. Now, Princess Zara, when you say shared consciousness, are we talking about a temporary psychic link similar to the Vultan mind meld, or more of a permanent telepathic bond like the hive minds of Cygnus Prime? Zara glanced at Marcus with an expression that clearly said, is he always like this? Before answering patiently, the ritual of understanding creates a temporary empathic connection. We would be able to sense each other's emotions and share certain thoughts, but we would remain individuals. Fascinating. Finn scribbled notes furiously. And this ritual involves the sacred pool, which I assume is filled with a psychoactive compound derived from local flora that enhances telepathic abilities. The pool contains moonwater, Zara explained, blessed by 7 generations of star weavers, and infused with the essence of harmony flowers. It facilitates emotional openness and truth sharing. Finn nodded sagely. Classic consciousness-altering substance, very common in pre-warp civilizations. Marcus, you should be aware that participation in such rituals could be considered a binding agreement under Galactic Alliance marriage recognition laws. Marcus paled. What? Oh yes, Finn continued cheerfully. Subsection 47C of the Interspecies Union Regulations clearly states that any ceremony involving the mutual consent to psychic bonding in the presence of witnesses can be legally recognized as a marriage contract if both parties are of legal age and sound mind. Zara's luminous eyes widened. Your laws recognize heart bonds as marriage. Absolutely. Very progressive of us, really. Though there are some interesting tax implications you should be aware of. Finn, Marcus interrupted desperately. Are you saying that if I go through with this ritual, I'll legally be married under Alliance law? Well, not immediately, Finn said, consulting his data pad again. The bond would have to be maintained for a minimum of 30 standard days, and there would need to be a formal declaration of intent before a registered official. That would be me, actually. Lucky coincidence that I'm here. Marcus buried his face in his hands. This cannot be happening. Zara moved closer to him, her expression concerned. Marcus, if your laws forbid this ritual, we can find another way. Perhaps the ceremony of distant admiration, where we simply gaze at each other across the amphitheater for 3 days, while the elders chant the genealogies of both our families. That's actually quite romantic, Finn said approvingly. Though I should mention that prolonged eye contact between species can sometimes trigger involuntary mating responses. There was an incident on Rigel 4 where a human diplomat accidentally proposed to an entire royal court just by maintaining culturally appropriate eye contact during formal introductions. How is that even possible? Marcus demanded. Pheromone release triggered by visual stimuli, Finn explained matter-of-factly. The Rigelians communicate romantic interest through pupil dilation patterns. Fascinating species. Really, they have 17 different categories of marriage, including temporary unions for tax purposes and ceremonial partnerships for agricultural festivals. Zara tilted her head thoughtfully. We have similar traditions, the bonding of seasons. Where do people unite for a single harvest cycle to ensure good crops? The union of stars, which lasts until both parties have learned what they need from each other. The eternal joining, which binds souls across lifetimes, Marcus finished, remembering fragments from his rushed cultural briefing. Your grandmother mentioned that one. Ah, so you have been studying our ways, Zara said, her face brightening. That shows proper respect for our customs. Actually, Finn interjected, I should point out that under Alliance regulations, any demonstration of cultural knowledge can be interpreted as formal courtship behavior. You might want to be careful about how much you reveal about your research. Marcus looked at him incredulously. Are you saying that learning about someone's culture is considered flirting in 17 different systems? Yes, Finn replied cheerfully. The Altarians consider it highly erotic when someone correctly pronounces their ceremonial food names. The Centaurians believe that anyone who learns their traditional dances is declaring romantic intent, and the Velvarians, perhaps, Zara interrupted gently. We should focus on the current situation rather than exploring the romantic customs of the entire galaxy. Right, good point, Finn said, tapping his data pad again. Now, Princess, if Marcus were to participate in this ritual of understanding, what would be the minimum level of commitment required from your people's perspective? Zara considered this carefully. He would need to approach the ritual with an open heart and genuine curiosity about forming a connection with me. The Moonwater cannot create false bonds, it only reveals what already exists. And if no existing emotional connection is revealed, then we would part as friends, and both our peoples would understand that the stars were not aligned for union. Finn nodded approvingly. Very reasonable. Much more straightforward than the Zirian blood oath ceremonies I was reading about. Marcus, this actually sounds like a fairly low-risk cultural exchange opportunity. Marcus looked between Finn's encouraging expression and Zara's hopeful face. Low risk? We're talking about a psychic bond with someone I've known for less than a day. Temporary psychic bond, Finn corrected. And think of the scientific opportunities. When will you ever again have the chance to study plant consciousness from the perspective of an empathically linked native guide? The botanical discoveries alone could revolutionize xenobotany. Despite himself, Marcus felt a familiar spark of curiosity. The plants here do seem to respond to emotional states. Because they do, Zara said softly. And through our bond, you would be able to feel what they feel, hear what they sing. Imagine understanding photosynthesis not just as a chemical process, but as a joyful dance with sunlight. Marcus stared at the glowing pool, his scientific mind warring with his practical instincts. Finn, what's your professional assessment? Finn straightened importantly. As your cultural attaché, I believe this represents an unprecedented opportunity for interspecies understanding and scientific advancement. As your friend, I think you'd regret not finding out what might happen. Marcus looked at Zara, who was watching him with patient hope in her luminous eyes. And if I find out I'm not ready for any kind of permanent bond, then you'll have learned something important about yourself, she replied simply. And I will have learned that the heart cannot be commanded, only discovered. Taking a deep breath, Marcus began removing his boots. I suppose, he said, stepping toward the pool. The worst that could happen is I end up with the most unusual research paper in xenobotanical history. Naya Starweaver had been orchestrating love stories for over 2 centuries, and she could sense the delicate threads of destiny weaving themselves into a pattern, more beautiful than any tapestry, from her vantage point in the Crystal Gardens, overlooking the sacred pool chamber. She watched her granddaughter and the earnest young human prepare for the ritual of understanding, with the satisfaction of a master craftsperson admiring her work. Grandmother, came a soft voice behind her. Are you certain this is wise? Naya turned to see her great-nephew Joran approaching, his usual cheerful demeanor clouded with concern. As Zara's closest cousin and heir to the throne, should anything happen to the princess, he had good reason to worry about the implications of this unprecedented union. Wisdom, dear child, is often indistinguishable from madness until time reveals which is which, Naya replied, her ancient eyes twinkling. But tell me, What troubles you about the human? Joran settled beside her on the crystal bench, his opalescent skin flickering with nervous patterns. He seems unaware of what he's getting into. What if the bond reveals that they are incompatible? The prophecy speaks of great alliance, but what if it speaks falsely? Naya smiled, remembering her own doubts centuries ago when she had first undergone the ritual of understanding with her beloved Thane. The prophecy speaks not of perfection, but of potential. Love is not about finding someone who needs no growth. It is about finding someone worth growing alongside. Below them, Marcus was cautiously entering the moonwater pool while Zara guided him through the preliminary meditations. Even from this distance, Naya could sense the careful walls the human had built around his heart. Walls constructed of intellect and caution, and a lifetime of preferring the predictable company of plants to the chaos of emotional connection. Watch how gently he handles the harmony flowers, Naya murmured to Joran. See how he listens when Zara explains their songs. He approaches our ways with the same reverence he shows his botanical specimens, not as something to conquer, but as something to understand. But understanding is not love, Joran protested. No, Naya agreed, but it is often love's first disguise. The ritual was beginning now, and Naya felt the familiar tingle in the air that accompanied the awakening of the moonwater's properties. Both Marcus and Zara had settled into the pool, sitting across from each other with their hands resting on a shared crystal formation that pulsed with increasing brightness. I can feel it starting. Zara's voice drifted up to them, filled with wonder. Marcus, your thoughts are so organized, like a garden with perfectly labeled rows. Marcus's reply was tinged with amazement. And yours are like music made of light. I've never experienced anything like this. It's as if I can feel the emotions behind your words. Naya closed her eyes, extending her own ancient psychic abilities to monitor the ritual from afar. What she sensed made her breath catch with surprise and delight. The bond forming between them was unlike anything she had witnessed in her long life. Not the passionate explosion of young infatuation, nor the comfortable settling of arranged marriages, but something entirely new. Fascinating, she whispered. What is it? Joran asked, alarmed by his grandmother's tone. His mind. Naya said slowly, it works like a scientist's, yes, but also like a gardener's. He doesn't simply catalog what he observes, he nurtures it, tends it, helps it grow. And her spirit, she paused, sensing deeper into the growing connection. She has been lonely, our Zara, all her life surrounded by those who see only the princess, never the person. But he sees the person first, through their shared consciousness. Marcus was experiencing his first true conversation with the harmony flowers that surrounded the pool. His scientific skepticism was crumbling as he felt their genuine joy at being acknowledged, their simple but profound contentment with the cycle of growth and rest. This is impossible, he said aloud, his voice filled with wonder rather than denial. They're actually communicating, not through chemical signals or environmental responses, but with something like emotion. They are happy that you finally hear them, Zara replied, her own consciousness intertwined with his enough that she could feel his amazement, as if it were her own. The plants of our world have been waiting so long for someone who could bridge understanding between their songs and your sciences. Naya smiled as she felt the first threads of genuine affection beginning to bloom between them. It was not love yet that would take time to grow properly, but it was the fertile ground in which love could take root. There, she said to Joran, do you feel it? The moment when two souls recognize something valuable in each other. But Joran was frowning, his attention focused on something else entirely. Grandmother, we have a problem. Look, Naya followed his gaze and saw several spacecraft descending toward the palace landing pads, sleek vessels bearing the insignia of the Galactic Alliance diplomatic corps. The bureaucrats have arrived, she said with resignation. I had hoped we would have more time. Time for what? Joran asked. For them to discover what they mean to each other without outside interference, Naya replied, rising gracefully from the bench. Come, dear child. We must ensure that officialdom does not destroy what destiny has begun to build. In the pool chamber below, Marcus and Zara were completely absorbed in their shared experience. Through their bond, Marcus was learning to sense the subtle emotional landscape of the crystal gardens, feeling the contentment of well-tended plants and the intricate harmonies they created together. Zara, in turn, was experiencing the wonder of scientific discovery, the joy Marcus felt when understanding clicked into place, the patient satisfaction of careful observation and analysis. "I never realized," Marcus said softly, "how much emotion is involved in real scientific understanding. I thought I was being objective, but I can feel how much I love the process of discovery. And I never understood how beautiful logic could be," Zara replied. "The way you organize thoughts and test ideas, it's like music, but made of concepts instead of sounds." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of formal footsteps approaching the chamber. Finn O'Malley appeared in the doorway, his usual cheerful expression replaced by bureaucratic concern. "Sorry to interrupt," he said apologetically, "but we have a situation. The diplomatic corps has arrived, and they're not happy about the irregular nature of these proceedings." Marcus and Zara remained in the pool, their hands still touching the shared crystal, but Naya could sense their growing anxiety through the bond. "What do they want?" Marcus asked. "To put it bluntly, they want to shut this down immediately and extract you for a full debriefing about unauthorized contact with a pre-alliance species." "Pre-alliance?" Zara's confusion rippled through the water, causing the surrounding crystals to flicker. "But we have been members of the Galactic Alliance for 3 years, Finn winced. "Well, that's where things get complicated. Apparently, there was a clerical error in your species classification. You were listed as pending review rather than full member status, which means, technically, any marriage or bonding ceremony involving Alliance citizens requires formal approval from the Xenocultural Integration Committee." Naya felt ancient anger stir in her chest. In all her centuries, she had seen bureaucracy strangle more dreams than war ever had. "And how long does such approval take?" she asked, entering the chamber with regal authority. "Anywhere from 6 months to 6 years, Finn admitted miserably. "Depending on the complexity of the case." Marcus and Zara looked at each other through their shared bond, and Naya felt their dismay as a physical pain. The connection they were building was still fragile, requiring nurturing and time to grow strong. Separating them now would be like uprooting a seedling just as its first leaves unfurled. "There must be another way," Zara said, her voice carrying the steel of royal determination despite her obvious distress. Naya stepped forward, her ancient wisdom crystallizing into a plan. "There is," she said slowly, "but it will require courage from both of you and trust in what you are discovering together." Marcus looked up at her, hope and wariness warring in his expression. "What kind of plan?" Naya's smile was sharp as a crystal blade, the kind that reminds the galaxy that some bonds are too important to be broken by paperwork. The confrontation came at dawn, as Zirian 7's twin suns painted the Crystal Palace in shades of gold and rose. Marcus stood beside Zara in the great amphitheater, their hands still bearing the faint silver markings from their night in the sacred pool, facing down 3 stern-faced officials from the Galactic Alliance diplomatic corps. "Mr. Vale," said the lead official, a severe woman whose uniform bore enough insignia to outfit a small army, "you are in direct violation of Protocol 847 Delta regarding unauthorized cultural integration with non-ratified species. You will terminate this liaison immediately and return with us for debriefing." Marcus felt Zara's distress through their newfound bond, a sharp ache that settled in his chest like a physical wound. The ritual of understanding had lasted only 1 night, but it had changed everything. Through their shared consciousness, he had experienced the world as Zara did, feeling the songs of every living thing, understanding the intricate web of connections that bound all life together. And she had seen through his eyes the wonder of scientific discovery, the patient joy of unraveling nature's mysteries one careful observation at a time. "With respect, Ambassador," Marcus replied, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice, "I believe you're operating under outdated information." "Excuse me." The ambassador's eyebrow rose dangerously. Naya Starweaver stepped forward, her ancient presence commanding attention despite her deceptively frail appearance. In her hands, she carried a crystalline tablet that pulsed with official seals and signatures. The crystalline dominion completed full alliance membership ratification 6 months ago. she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater. All documentation was properly filed with the Bureau of Xenocultural Affairs. The ambassador's confidence wavered slightly as she examined the tablet through her scanner. This shows active membership status, but our records indicate that bureaucratic incompetence delayed the updating of your files. Naya finished smoothly. A regrettable but hardly unprecedented situation. Finn O'Malley chose that moment to burst into the amphitheater. His face flushed with excitement, and his data pad clutched triumphantly in his hands. "I've got it," he announced breathlessly. "The legal precedent we need." All eyes turned to the enthusiastic cultural attaché as he consulted his notes. Alliance versus Martian Colonial Authority, Stardate 2387. Quote, "When do Alliance citizens enter into a bonding ceremony, recognized by the laws of a member world? Said union shall be considered valid regardless of species, homeworld, or prior bureaucratic oversights." End quote. The ambassador's face darkened. "Mr. O'Malley, that precedent applies only to formal marriage ceremonies, not to whatever this ritual was, actually," Zara said, stepping forward with the regal bearing that reminded everyone present that she was, in fact, a princess. "The ritual of understanding is considered a preliminary marriage ceremony under our laws. Marcus and I are now formally betrothed according to Crystalline Dominion statute." Marcus felt a flutter of panic through their bond, quickly followed by Zara's gentle reassurance. They had discussed this possibility during the long night of shared consciousness, exploring not just each other's minds, but their hopes for the future. The connection between them was real, deepening with each passing hour. But it was still new and fragile. Moreover, Naya added with a smile that could have cut crystal, "As the eldest Star Weaver and current regent of the Crystalline Dominion, I invoke the right of royal protection. Any attempt to remove Princess Zara's chosen consort without her consent constitutes an act of aggression against our sovereignty." The amphitheater fell silent except for the gentle chimming of crystal formations responding to the emotional tension. In the air, Marcus could feel the weight of thousands of watching eyes. The hopes and concerns of two peoples balanced on the edge of his next words. "Ambassador," he said finally, "I appreciate the Alliance's concern for proper protocols, but I'm not being coerced or manipulated. I'm making a choice to learn about a culture that has something profound to teach us, and to explore a connection that could benefit both our species through their bond." He felt Zara's surge of love and gratitude, emotions so pure and strong they made his knees weak. "The plants here," he continued, his scientific passion lending strength to his voice, "they represent a completely new model of consciousness and communication. The implications for xenobiology, for agriculture, for our understanding of life itself are staggering. And Zara," he turned to look at her, seeing both the princess and the brilliant, lonely woman beneath. "She's the key to understanding it all, as he is the key to bridging our peoples," Zara added, her voice carrying the authority of generations of rulers through our bond. "I have seen the beauty in his scientific methods, the poetry in logic and careful observation. Imagine what we could accomplish together, crystalline empathy combined with human analytical thinking." The ambassador looked between them, her stern expression warring with what might have been curiosity. "And what, exactly, are you proposing?" Naya stepped forward again, her ancient eyes sparkling with triumph. "A formal cultural exchange program," she announced. Marcus would serve as Earth's first resident xenobotanist to the Crystalline Dominion, while Zara would accompany him as our ambassador to human scientific institutions. Their continued bonding would serve as a symbol of cooperation between our peoples. "A working marriage," Marcus said, the phrase feeling right on his tongue. "We learn about each other while our peoples learn from each other." Finn was frantically consulting his data pad again. "Actually, that's brilliant. There's tons of precedent for diplomatic marriages serving as cultural bridges. The Altarian Centaurian Peace Accords of 2341, the Rigel Unity Ceremony of 2398, and the tax benefits alone would make the Alliance Treasury very happy." The ambassador raised her hand for silence, her expression thoughtful. "Mr. Vale, Princess Zara, I want to be absolutely clear about what you're proposing. You would be entering into a marriage that serves as both personal union and diplomatic alliance, with the understanding that your relationship would be subject to public scrutiny and political pressure from both your peoples. Marcus and Zara exchanged a look through their bond, sharing a moment of perfect understanding. "We're scientists and diplomats," Zara said with a smile. "We're used to working under pressure." "Besides," Marcus added, feeling a grin spread across his face, "if we can survive accidentally getting engaged at a first contact ceremony, I think we can handle whatever the galaxy throws at us." The ambassador was quiet for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "Very well. I'll recommend that the Alliance approve this cultural exchange program. Pending proper documentation and regular progress reports." The amphitheater erupted in harmonious celebration as thousands of crystalline Dominion citizens sang their joy. Through their bond, Marcus felt Zara's relief and happiness as if they were his own emotions, and he realized that somewhere in the space of a single night, he had stopped being able to imagine a future without her in it. "So," he said, taking her hand as crystal formations around them pulsed with sympathetic light, "I guess this makes us the galaxy's most unconventional research team, and its most romantic." Zara replied, standing on her toes to kiss him while their peoples cheered around them. "Though I suspect our first joint paper on plant consciousness is going to raise some eyebrows in the xenobotanical journals." Marcus laughed, pulling her closer as the twin suns climbed higher and the crystal palace sang with reflected light. "Dr. Marcus and Princess Zara Valenethes," he said, testing the sound of their joined names. "I like it." "So do I," she whispered against his lips, and through their bond he felt the deep contentment of two souls who had found their perfect, growing conditions. "So do I." 6 months later, their first joint research paper, Empathic Resonance in Crystalline Flora, a cross-species study in consciousness and communication, would revolutionize both xenobotany and diplomatic theory. But that morning, as they stood together in the Crystal Palace with the songs of alien flowers welcoming the dawn, they were simply two people who had accidentally found love, while looking for something else entirely. And in Naya Starweaver's ancient wisdom, that was exactly how the best love stories always began.